David Carr and Keegan O'Toole wrestled in a very exciting 165 pounds matchup. Every conference dual champion was decided, and a few superstar seniors wrestled in their final home matches. These are your wrestling headlines presented by the Wrestling Consultant. Now let's stop stalling and start talking our first wrestling headline, which is that David Carr versus Keegan O'Toole was the most electric match of the year, at least at 165 pounds. And I don't think I'm exaggerating that, because when you look back at the beginning of the year and at this weight, David Carr versus Quincy Monday was one of the most anticipated, excited matchups, hyped up matchups at the NWCA All-Star Classic. But between you and me, it didn't do a whole lot for me. It was kind of boring. Well, this match between these two NCAA champions was quite different. And I mentioned that stat. Both of these guys NCAA champions. Keegan O'Toole, the number one guy at 165 pounds of Mizzou. David Carr, the number two at the weight. Each of them holding undefeated seasons going into this match. Two of the top 10 winning streaks in all of the NCAA. I mean, unbelievable stats between these two guys. So what happened in the match? Well, all right, let's talk about it. Well, David Carr in the first period shot in on a double leg on Keegan O'Toole, ended up taking him down with about 15 seconds left on the clock, rode him out the remainder of the period, and in the second period, chose bottom and escaped very quickly. So very early on, he was up 3-0. He was looking good, and O'Toole was also being an aggressor on his feet. He ended up shooting a takedown on David Carr, taking him down to the mat, but Carr earned a very quick escape after that. That led to this moment here between Keegan O'Toole and Carr, where Carr was hitting this fancy footwork, and the announcers were calling him Muhammad Ali, and he looked good here, right? He reminded me of RBY and his footwork that he hits all the time. Well, at this point, Keegan O'Toole shot in on Carr, and Carr was just able to start hitting his defense here. I mean, it was just absolutely phenomenal defense by David Carr in this entire match, and really just a great performance overall. But you see him fighting back there, going now after Keegan getting on his leg, and he was able to score a takedown. There were 15 seconds left on the clock and was ultimately awarded 2 points with about 5 seconds left on the clock. This led, as he rode him out the rest of the period, which is, just key to winning this match. In the third period, Keegan O'Toole chose bottom, but David Carr rode him out for the entire third period. That's not something you see every week. David Carr ended up winning this match 7-2 and is now the number one ranked guy at the weight. But what else happened in this dual meet between Mizzou and Iowa State? Because that was a fun dual meet in and of itself, and that match between Carr and O'Toole was really, influential on this dual meet. Mizzou won 23-12 against Iowa State. And there were some other fun dual meets or matches in this dual meet. One of those being Rocky Elam and Younger Bastida. What a fun match between these two guys. Well, Rocky Elam earned an impressive victory over Bastida, 4-0 decision. The other match that was impressive to me was this one between Brock Mahler, who pinned Paniro Johnson in the sudden victory period. Wow, what a win for Mahler. And he's honestly kind of a dark horse for me to watch at 149 pounds in the postseason. And speaking of the postseason, that leads to my takeaway, which is that David Carr and Keegan O'Toole is far from over. Honestly, this entire 165 pounds weight class is far from over. But there's a good chance we're going to see them wrestle again at the Big 12s and even in the national finals. I'm interested to see who wins next, but honestly, overall, I'm just happy they give us such a fun match. And if you've enjoyed the wrestling content so far this season, make sure you blast double that subscribe button. Seriously, over 60% of you who've been watching this season haven't clicked subscribe. Why is that? Probably for you old geezers, you're like, I don't want to subscribe to another streaming service like Netflix and Hulu and Fanco. Well, guess what? It's free to subscribe on YouTube. All it takes is a couple seconds of your time. And it seriously helps grow this channel, but more importantly, help reach even more wrestling fans so we can grow the sport. Thanks ahead of time for clicking subscribe. Now, with that said, let's talk our second wrestling headline, which is that it's all over. Yes, unfortunately, the regular dual meet season is over. But with that, we have crowned every single conference champion. All 7. Actually, there are a few more because there were some ties in the conferences this season, starting out with the ACC. Pitt tied with 2 other teams. They finished their season off with a win against Duke. Virginia Tech finished off with a win against Virginia. And they weren't the only two teams here, because the third team that tied for the ACC title was NC State, who finished their season off with a win against North Carolina, their in-state foe, just like Virginia Tech and Virginia. The ACC was wild this year with NC State losing to Virginia Tech, losing to Pitt, and Pitt losing to NC State. That three-way tie made for some insanity. Now, there was another conference that tied, actually a couple more, but first we got to talk about the Big Ten, with Penn State taking home the Big Ten title, taking out Iowa and Michigan this year, and remaining undefeated throughout this season. They finished their season off against Clarion. No Clarion's on a Big Ten team, but a lot of these teams actually didn't finish off by wrestling conference foes, but I did just want to point that out as a disclaimer. In the Big 12, Mizzou ended up beating Iowa State, and though Iowa State beat Oklahoma State and Oklahoma State beat Mizzou, that resulted in a tie between those three teams as well. Oklahoma State finished their season off with a win against Oklahoma, yet a loss to Iowa, and I'll be talking about that more in a bit. As far as the Ivy League and the EIWA, Cornell won their 42nd Ivy League title, an impressive feat for Big Red. And in the MAC, you saw Lock Haven and Rider actually tie for the East Division of the MAC. They tied because Rider ended up losing to Lock Haven. Lock Haven, though, lost to Clarion. And you would be wondering, why isn't Clarion also sharing a clinch of this title? Well, that's because Clarion had a couple of other conference losses. But on the other side of the division, because the MAC is just so darn big, they have a couple of different division titles. You had Central Michigan winning the west side of that division. Central Michigan always one of the top teams in the MAC. And in the Pac-12, Cal Poly, no, not Arizona State, because they lost to Cal Poly. Cal Poly won the Pac-12, and I'm honestly looking forward to those two teams, especially facing off in the postseason. And in the SoCon, though it gives me absolutely no pleasure because I don't like this team at all, sorry, App State won the SoCon. Now, I will give them some props. It was an impressive victory, winning 22-14 over Campbell. In-state foe, one of my favorite rivalries in all of college wrestling. I mean, seriously, it really is. But App State beat Campbell. They beat Presbyterian 43-0 and finished their season off with a shutout against Davidson 47-0. And that leads to my takeaways. I mentioned it already 14 times. This season was insane. And having these conference champions, so many ties, is just wild to me, that there weren't just like outright champions in every single conference. And I don't know the last time it's happened like this, but I'll tell you what, I'm sure expecting some different results come tournament season in just a couple of weeks. So let's talk some quick lightning headlines. The first of these being Nebraska Cornhuskers beating Arizona State 25-15. Now, fun fact, at the beginning of the season, Nebraska was actually ranked all the way down at number 16, while Arizona State was all the way up at number 6. And at this point in the year, at the end of it, they have flipped. Arizona State is now all the way down at number 20, while Nebraska is all the way up at number 6. An impressive season for the Cornhuskers. Navy defeated their biggest rival, Army, 18-13 over the weekend, as well as Ohio State earning an impressive victory over Cornell. Now, I know just because a couple of you have mentioned it from my previous videos, Cornell was out a couple of starters. They didn't have Yianni. That was, a detriment to them, part of the reason why they lost. But guess what? A dual win is a dual win, right? One of the most impressive and exciting matches from this dual meet was Vito Arujau beating Jesse Mendez. And though Vito Arujau is a top talent and has been around for a couple of years, I'm excited to see where Jesse Mendez goes in the future, considering he is so young and is competing against the top guys. The other dual meet that happened over the weekend was Iowa defeating Oklahoma State 28-7. They absolutely clobbered the Cowboys. And there were some impressive matches here. Yes, Dayton Fix and Spencer Lee both wrestled, but you also had Jacob Warner with a nice win, Abe Assad earning a victory over Travis Whitlock, Nelson Brands earning an upset over Dustin Plott. It was a fun dual meet from top to bottom, but Iowa just wiped the floor with Oklahoma State, which makes me wonder, is this even a big rivalry anymore? I know it's historic. I know Oklahoma State fans, Iowa fans, don't get so mad at me, but it's just not that fun of a rivalry anymore. At least those are my thoughts on it. I mean, look at these recent results. 28-7. 23-9, 34-6. That's just lopsided. It's not even that fun anymore. Oklahoma State's last win over Iowa was 27-12 all the way back in 2019. Now, the other crazy thing that happened over the weekend was people and fans getting upset, and generally it was just a couple of people upset that high school seniors were celebrating state finals victories. One of these came from a tweet from Stu Pospisil, who said backflips finally are being docked 1 team point at the state wrestling finals. About time. Those would be 15 yards in football, a technical in basketball. Fair is fair, wrestling fans. And you see Jason Bryant already commenting on this. If I ever get this crotchety in the way I cover sports, I hope my friends would tell me before I make this contextually lacking position. I mean, come on. Let's be real. It's absolutely ridiculous that people are getting mad over high school seniors celebrating after a state finals victory. It's almost as ridiculous as those same high schoolers not getting guidance on how to wrestle in college. It's not that easy to figure out the process. Like, when do you go to visit campuses? How do you contact coaches? And which division should you even wrestle? If those are the questions that you have, then you got to talk to an expert who understands the process. Former D1 head coach Teague Moore started the wrestling consultant to help wrestlers and their parents understand the recruiting process, transfer deadlines, NIL deals, and all eligibility rules. If any of that sounds like something that you're struggling with, then go to thewrestlingconsultant.com for your free introductory call. All information is at the first link in the description below. Thanks to the Wrestling Consultant for sponsoring this video. And our third wrestling headline is that 3 superstar seniors finished their careers, at least their regular season careers, with falls. And each of these wrestlers finished their seasons at home. It's always a shame to see guys like Yianni Diakomihalis wrestle his last match, but also an honor at the same time. Though he didn't wrestle this weekend against Sammy Sasso of Ohio State, really wish we would have seen that. He did finish his career against Binghamton last week with a fall. He had only 1 home dual meet loss throughout his entire career, and that actually came this year to Austin Gomez. Yianni Diakomihalis, of course, has earned over 100 career victories and is going for his 4th title this year. Another guy going for his 4th title is Spencer Lee. Spencer Lee, you see his teammates lifting him up there. They're having a bunch of fun going into this final dual meet. And, you know, Spencer Lee it's been an honor to watch him compete over the years. Spencer finished his career with a pin. And I mean, just watch this. Watch it. Oh, he's ready. You're ready. He's about to deck Reese Whitcraft of Oklahoma State. I'm sorry, but this was just such a cool move for Spencer Lee, finishing with a 52nd pin in his final home match, his 34th career pin with the Iowa Hawkeyes. You know, I am excited to see where Spencer goes in this postseason, but one of the things that he teased is actually his international career and why we should continue to watch him as he continues to succeed on that circuit, and that's something I'm looking forward to. The 3rd senior that finished his season was a Penn Stater. That is Roman Bravo Young, and yes, there are a couple other seniors. I'm going to save that for the takeaway, but Roman Bravo Young finished his regular season with a fall as well against Prinkney of Clarion in the 2nd period. RBY earned 49 straight victories. And although this season, honestly, we weren't sure how much Roman Bravo Young was even going to be able to wrestle. He was coming back for another year. We expected him not to maybe wrestle too many matches, but he's wrestled 13. He's undefeated, 13-0. Spencer Lee's 14-0. Each of them didn't have to wrestle all these matches in their senior years. I know that, like, sometimes with injuries and with other stuff going on in your life, it's not able to happen. But I'm happy that Roman Bravo Young was able to say farewell to Rec Hall with this pin. And that leads me to my takeaway, which is that I'm so happy to have watched all these seniors wrestle. It's going to be sad after this national championship ends, but I can't wait to see how it does end. Now, if you're interested in knowing about Bo Nickel, who actually just announced his upcoming UFC fight coming up in March, I have a whole video explaining how he got his start in MMA. I recommend that you check that out. But if you're not interested in that type of video, go ahead and hit subscribe to Fanco Wrestling. Those were your wrestling headlines.